I actually talked to Mike yesterday. He got done and he just talked about how surreal it was for him. He grew up in Greenfield, and he went then to the facility for the first time, which they share with Pitt. And just being in that building in itself, it's, again, I remember when I went in there for the first time, there was a mystique about that building, and you get inside there and then you operate underneath that whole scenario that you operate under. It's a special place. It's a unique place. I think that's the biggest thing I would say. There's total transparency, total collaboration, and I think it's a great place to kind of grow your resume, whatever it may be, whether it's from the beginning or if Mike happens to go back there. I think it'd almost be like a full circle coming back home.
A lot of young coaches. Obviously, you hired young. Tomlin hired young. I don't know when Chuck got hired. I assume he was young as well.
He was 36. I was 34. Mike was 34.
Okay, so been the trend, young. And you hear a lot of Yinzers right now just expecting the same thing. Hey, a lot of Yinzers voicing, we want young, we want young. Could it be maybe you go different here and bring in the older veteran like Coach McCarthy? And what do you think he potentially brings to a team where maybe young guy doesn't know yet? Or young guy growing with team, a part of the entire process to make it great like you had to do?
Yeah, I think those are two ways that you talk about going about this, Pat. And I think, again, you put those in separate categories. You saw the first two guys ago, obviously John Harbaugh and then Kevin Stefanski, and Hafney had been a coach at BC, and Robert Saleh was a head coach before. And I think as you talk to the people going through this process, that you can see a big difference between guys who have coached before. They're much more prepared for some of the questions, but then the young guys. And the only thing I'll say about the young guys is it's nice to mold a guy underneath what your system is all about, what those core values are all about. I know when I came to Pittsburgh, Mr. Rooney was very good about allowing me to be a part of everything, but then you had to earn the right to have input. I think that's the biggest thing. I came in there. I wanted to make sure I had my hands on everything, whether it's free agency, whether it's a salary cap, obviously the draft you're going to be involved with. But the biggest thing for me was making sure I got myself a staff. And I think that's the biggest thing right now for some of these teams is there are some good assistant coaches out there, but they're going to keep be taken up as you wait, the longer you wait. So I think there's a lot to be said for that from the standpoint, if you make your coach now, he's got a little bit of a more pool of coaches that he can put around him. And I think that's a big part of your success is your assistant coaches.
Yeah, and if you're a defensive coach who gets a head coaching job now, and you got a young quarterback or MVP quarterback like Minter just got hired at Baltimore, it's like, who's the offense coordinator now that's going to have to come with you? Obviously, you rely on your network, but coordinator is very important. Offensive coordinator, very important, especially if you're a defensive head coach. And you got to have guys in line, too, because if you have success, that guy's going to get a head coaching job. That's a fascinating little wrinkle to this all, Coach.
It really is, but as a matter of fact, when I lost Chan Gailey back in 1997 after his second year as an OC, and the Dallas Cowboys, they signed him really right around the time we were in Indy, at the Combine. And so I really had a very late search to go through. We had Cordell Stewart coming off his best year, his first year as a starter in '97. We hired Ray Sherman, and that did not work out. And so I went out and got Kevin Gilbride to bring some credibility back. And after 2 years, that did not work as way I thought it should. And I went back on my staff with Malarkey then and then having Wisenhunt. So I think a big part of what I learned and the advice I give to people is having a backup plan. I remember saying this to Dan Campbell a couple of years ago. You're going to lose some of these guys. Just make sure that you want to be able to keep it in-house. Don't have to change the system. I'd rather have the coach learn it new as opposed to the players. And so I think that's the system we had was the same system Ron Earhart had when I hired him back in 1992. We had that to the very end. Yes, you come in, you put your little plan on, you can do some variations to what that is, but the terminology was the same for both sides of the ball. That way when players came and coaches might have lost coaches, we didn't lose a beat. We were able to, again, you put your fingerprints and your mold on what you want to do within the terminology that you have so that not everyone has to relearn it again. So I think that's one of the things you have to be able to do. And again, I go back to the same thing. The first staffs you have, like I made a lot of changes my first couple of years because you have to, until you work with someone, you really don't know who they are and do they think like you think, and you really don't know them until you're with people 70 hours a week.
And you said that you would actually move on from a member just to shake some things up. Hey, every once in a while you got to keep everybody fresh. Didn't you say that? I think you've told us that before.
I have told you that before. There's probably no metric that would quantify me making a change except for the fact that I just had a feel and a pulse for the fact that we needed to have a different voice in the room. And so, and that to me was like trying to hold people accountable. You do it with the players. I did it with the coaches as well. I was pretty hard on the coaches, and I coached the coaches. And so I let the coaches coach the players, because I think this is really important to have.
Steelers Nation, lock in with me right now, because what just happened in Pittsburgh quietly changed everything. The Rooney Rule has officially been satisfied. That might sound like a technicality, but in the NFL, that moment is when the real power moves begin. The Steelers are no longer boxed in by process. They are now free to choose their next head coach the moment they feel the conviction is there. And when you combine that with the names still in the room, Mike McCarthy, Brian Flores, Anthony Weaver, Chris Shula, and Nathan Scheelhaase, this suddenly becomes one of the most fascinating high-stakes coaching searches in the entire league. This isn't a slow, disorganized search. This is a franchise that knows exactly who it is and what it wants. Pittsburgh came into this process later than most teams, but they immediately zeroed in on the right targets and got to work. Mike McCarthy, the Pittsburgh native, was the first second-round interview. That alone tells you how seriously the organization is taking him. This is not just a nostalgia play. This is a man who grew up in this city, understands the weight of that building, and has already proven he can lead teams deep into the postseason. When Bill Cowher talked about McCarthy walking into the Steelers facility and feeling the mystique of that place, that wasn't fluff. That was Pittsburgh football culture being acknowledged by someone who lived it. But the beauty of this moment is that the Steelers are not locked into one type of candidate. Brian Flores brings that hard-nosed, no-nonsense defensive identity that fits the AFC North like a glove. Anthony Weaver has built one of the most respected defensive resumes in the league, rising through Baltimore, Houston, and now Miami. Chris Shula and Nathan Scheelhaase represent the younger, innovative side of the league, the Rams-style modern approach that is winning playoff games right now. This isn't a panic search. This is a deep, thoughtful chess match. What really stands out, though, is how prepared Pittsburgh is for the next phase. Once the head coach is hired, the real work begins. Free agency, the draft, and rebuilding a roster that underperformed on defense in 2025. The Steelers allowed nearly 244 passing yards per game and finished in the bottom third of the league in total defense. That is not the Steelers' standard. That is why this coaching hire matters so much. It is not just about who stands on the sideline. It is about who they bring with them: coordinators, position coaches, culture builders. And that's where someone like Mike McCarthy becomes especially interesting. Experienced head coaches understand something younger candidates are still learning. The coaching staff you assemble often matters just as much as the scheme you run. McCarthy has been through hiring cycles. He knows how fast the best assistants disappear. He knows how to build a staff that can stabilize a locker room and accelerate a rebuild. When Bill Cowher talked about waiting too long can cost you elite coordinators, he was speaking directly to this moment. Pittsburgh cannot afford to miss on that part of the process. The Rooney Rule itself is also part of this story. This policy was born in Pittsburgh. Dan Rooney changed the NFL by insisting that diversity and opportunity belong at the highest levels of leadership. And now, with Flores and Weaver completing in-person interviews, the Steelers have honored that legacy while still keeping their full football vision intact. They did this the right way. Now they are free to move forward with no barriers. And here is the most important thing for Steelers Nation to understand. This franchise is not drifting, they are positioning. They are letting the Rams finish their playoff run. They are evaluating Flores and Weaver. They are measuring McCarthy not just by his resume, but by his fit in Pittsburgh. This is what a serious organization looks like. There is no rush, but there is no confusion either. When the decision comes, it will be deliberate, informed, and aligned with what this city believes football should be: tough, smart, disciplined, relentless. Whether it ends up being McCarthy coming home, Flores bringing his edge, or one of the younger minds leading a modern evolution, the Steelers are moving with clarity and purpose, and that is exactly how championships are built. Steelers Nation, I want to hear from you. Who should be the next head coach in Pittsburgh? Does Mike McCarthy feel like the right fit, or do you want a new era led by someone like Flores or Shula? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to Steelers Nation Wire because this coaching decision is going to shape the next decade of Pittsburgh football.